Okay. Chapter 17. And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, so 99, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God, walk before me and be thou perfect. So let me just highlight here, the Lord appeared to Abram. Okay, so Abram is one of a few in the Old Testament that sees God's, his image. He appears before him. And, we're going to see, particularly in the next chapter, he looks like a man. Verse 2. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and I will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee. And I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee, and thy seed after thee, in their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee, and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said unto Abraham, Thou shalt keep my covenant, therefore, thou and thy seed after thee in their generations. This is my covenant which ye shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man child among you shall be circumcised. And ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man child in your generations, he that is born in the house or bought with money of any stranger which is not thy seed. He that is born in thy house, and he that is bought with thy money, must needs be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised man-child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He hath broken my covenant. All right, so you got something pretty important here that's going to basically persist throughout the whole Bible, this Abrahamic covenant. So let's talk about several things. First of all, he says, I'll make thee a father of many nations. So one thing is, Abraham's going to have several children. He has one through Hagar, which is Ishmael. He's going to have Isaac through Sarai. And then after Sarai dies, he's going to marry again, someone named Keturah, and he's going to have several children by her. So people tend to overlook that. They think Abraham just had 2 children, but I don't know. He has something like 5 or 6. And of course, they will have many children, and there'll be many nations. So that's one promise. Now, what God's going to do is he's going to refine the covenant to be a specific child of Abraham, and then a specific child of Isaac, so that these others that aren't in that line, when they try to lay claim to the Abrahamic covenant, God's going to say, nope, doesn't apply to you. And they're going to be jealous and want to claim, like a lot of the Muslims want to claim they're, Abraham's offspring. Well, you are, but you don't have the covenant. I'm not sure that Muslims circumcise their children, so there you go. All right, now the circumcision is to be a sign of the covenant. If you want to acknowledge the covenant made with your forefather, if you were a Jew, you would have to take the covenant. And of course, it's going to be something that the Mosaic covenant acknowledges as well. You have to be circumcised. And it needs to be done on the 8th day. Now, why is God making this covenant with Abraham? He says he's going to be a father of many nations, and those who bless him will be blessed. Why is God even doing this? You have to go back a few chapters in Genesis. So you don't know?
Well, I'll say because he made a promise.
Why did he bother to make a promise? Why did he bother to call Abraham in the first place?
Why did he bother to call him Abraham?
No, why did he bother to call him? He called him out of Ur of the Chaldees to go into Canaan. Why?
Because he wanted to build a nation of his own.
Because?
Got me there.
Okay, so at Babel, God gave up all the nations. They wanted to worship other gods. They wanted to disobey. We don't want to scatter. We want to do what we want to do. We want to worship God the way we want to worship. In fact, we want to worship other gods. And God says, fine. He confused them with their different languages, made them scatter through fear, and then he also assigned all the devils over the nations. And so basically, there's no one on earth, well, there's hardly anyone on earth worshiping God, because we find out Melchizedek was a priest of the Most High God. So, but he's an exception. And God says, I'm going to call a man, and I'm going to make a nation out of him, so that I will have a nation, because I've given up all the other ones. So God is working a long program that's going to take some time to build enough people to have a nation. And then they're going to be his people, and he will be their God. And all the other nations will envy Israel. Of course, Israel doesn't do very well. But that's what God's doing here. Okay? So the reason why I will bless those who bless you, God will bring salvation to those who bless Abraham's descendants. Those who bless Israel, they'll basically acknowledge Israel's God, and God will bring salvation to them. Otherwise, you don't want God. God is truth and he's life. If you don't want truth and life, you must want a lie and death. So that's what God's doing here. So what God's trying to do is he's trying to make a covenant with Abraham. And this is unconditional. Abraham doesn't have to do anything. God's going to give him a child. And then when Abraham dies, God's going to perpetuate the covenant. And Abraham's not going to have to do anything. And eventually the Mosaic covenant will come, and that's not unconditional, and there's things that Israel has to do. So that's the first half of chapter 17, the establishing of the covenant. Most covenants have a sign. What was the sign of the covenant made with Noah? After the flood, God made a covenant with Noah and all living creatures of the earth. And he set a sign, and the sign was what? So the sign was the rainbow, and that one is unconditional, and most people don't really acknowledge. Every time I see a rainbow, God's highlighting that he's remembering his covenant. All right, verse 15 of chapter 17. And God said unto Abraham, As for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. Basically, God has added an H to their names. And that H symbolizes God in some way. It might be something to do with he's a father of many nations, and I'm not sure. She's going to be a mother of many nations, so maybe it has something to do with that, not really so much God. But anyway, verse 16, And I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. Yes, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. So I think this is the first time you hear that there will be a child from Abraham and Sarah, whereas before, God just promised Abraham. And so by not revealing enough information, they've meddled around and not waited. So this is going to end up being, it's part of God's plan, because there's going to be a people that persecute his people. Verse 17, Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, Shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear? And Abraham said unto God, O that Ishmael might live before thee. And God said, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and his seed after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. What does 12 symbolize in the scripture?
The 12 nations, right?
Well, the 12 tribes of Israel. But here, God says there'll be 12 princes.
All the apostles?
No. There'll be 12 princes of Ishmael. So Ishmael, in a sense, will be similar to Israel. They'll have 12 princes, but they won't. They'll fight against each other rather than unite. So it's interesting that God has promised 12 princes for Ishmael. Isaac will only have 2 children, but one of his sons will have 12. All right. So, but my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. And he left off talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the selfsame day as God had said unto him. And Abraham was 90 years old and 9 when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. In the selfsame day was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son. And all the men of his house, born in the house, and bought with money of the stranger, were circumcised with him. So essentially everyone in Abraham's house is taking the circumcision, but it's really going to be through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that circumcision needs to be kept. I don't know if God, really required the other people in Abraham's, family line to do it as well. They may have done it. I don't know. All right. So if you read the New Testament, it's going to say that Abraham was essentially functionally dead. He couldn't have children anymore at this time. Sarah was already that way. So God was waiting for Abraham and Sarah to not be able to have children themselves.
Okay.
And what they proved is Abraham still could when he took Hagar in. He had a child on his own. It wasn't God's plan, but they're going to have a child now when both of them are impotent, if you want to view it that way. They're unable to, yet God can make it happen.
God shows his power now.